Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Joshua chapter 9, and we're going to be starting in verse 4 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we said last lesson, in the first three verses of Joshua 9, we said that this peace treaty that Israel makes with the Gibeonites, I think it's more than just based upon lies. That's what you'll hear a lot, that this is a lie, that Israel shouldn't have done this and it was wrong and bad. But I believe there was one commentator that made the suggestion, and I kind of agree with him, that this peace treaty was actually, in a sense, was God compensating the Gibeonite, or the Hivites, for what had happened to them 280 years earlier with Levi and Simeon, when they went in and destroyed all the men, the Hivites that were in the city. And you can read that in Genesis 34. And that God, I don't think really God was that happy with what they did. I mean, the king's son raped the sister and took her for his wife, wanted to marry her. They were angry, and in their anger, they went out and they killed a whole city full of men. And I think now, 280 years later, God is compensating these Hivites for what Levi and Simeon did. And I think that's more of the story. When we look behind it, I think that's more of what we're seeing here. So verse 4 says, they did work wily, and they went and made as if they had been ambassadors, and took old sacks upon their asses, and wine bottles, old and rent and bound up. Now, it says here that they did work wily. Now, as I said back in chapter 8 and verse 30, the Gibeonites were not really concerned with the God of Israel. They just wanted to save their own necks. We do not see them giving themselves to God. But listen, this still doesn't mean that God isn't going to take care of them. Almost exactly, I want you to listen to this, almost exactly 1,000 years after Joshua 9, we see the descendants of Gibeon. We see 95 people, 95 of them, returning from their captivity with the Jews in Babylon to help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. In Nehemiah chapter 7 and verse 25. And also, we see them helping Nehemiah rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. And that's Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 7. Although the Gibeonites have been looked upon as being a deceitful Gentile nation that was nothing more than a bother to Israel, yet if we study the Gibeonites' history, it may not actually be true. That may not be true. Now, let's read verses 5 and 6. And old shoes and clouded upon their feet, and old garments upon them, and all the bread of their provisions was dry and moldy. Now verse 6. And they went to Joshua unto the camp at Gilgal, and they said unto him and to the men of Israel, We be come from a far country. Now therefore make a league with us. Now, after the children of Israel leave Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, they travel about 30 miles southeast to go back to their camp and to their headquarters at Gilgal. The city of Gibeon is almost 15 miles west of Gilgal. It's almost directly west of Gilgal. The Gibeonites come and they present their deception to Joshua and to the children of Israel. Now, you will find you're going to find a multitude of pastors on internet, wherever, teaching about the warnings of not taking everything to God for his counsel and the results of that. The warning. Look at Israel and the Gibeonites. That's a warning that we need to take everything to God and don't assume anything. Just pray about everything. How we need not to trust in our own wisdom as we sojourn on this earth. And that's what a lot of teachers are going to teach on that when they get to this portion of Scripture. But I want you to consider that, listen, quite possibly there is a whole different lesson that God wants us to see. And it is the lesson of how God takes care of the oppressed. God takes care not only of the oppressed, he takes care of the abused, the poor, and the needy, and those who are taken advantage of. And God doesn't look after only those who are saved, but he looks after all people who are being oppressed, even the unsaved. Listen, his eyes are on all that are oppressed and taken advantage of. He sees it all. God says he doesn't like the oppression of the weak or the poor. And that's just not talking about his own people, the Israelites or saved people. It's talking about everyone. As the lie and the deception of the sons of Jacob end in the death of many men of the Hivites, so also the lie and the deception of the Gibeonites, who are Hivites, ended in the saving of the lives of everyone in their city. So it's just the opposite. Just the opposite. The lie and the deception that Levi and Simeon and his brethren, the lie that they gave to the Hivites 280 years later, you know what it ended up in? It ended up in the death of all those men. And now 280 years later, the Hivites now are lying to the Israelites. And their lie, instead of causing death, their lie to the Israelites preserves their whole city. Oh yeah. God did forbid the children of Israel to make a covenant with any nation in the land of Canaan. Is that true? Yes, it's true. Yes, we see this in Exodus chapter 23, verses 32 and 33. And we also see it in chapter 34 and verse 12 and Deuteronomy 7 and verse 2. But on this occasion, God did not intervene and speak to Joshua from the tabernacle and remind Joshua of his word of warning. God didn't say, Joshua, hey, listen, come on in here. I got to talk to you. You're about ready to make a deal with these Gibeonites. And you didn't even bother talking to me. I got something to tell. No, didn't happen. God didn't intervene at all. Was this a possible test? And yes, it is. This is a possible test to Joshua and the Israelites. But it seems strange. It seems strange that the Gibeonites would be the ones used for this test of obedience which Joshua and the children of Israel failed. So yeah, was it a test? Probably was. Yeah, but it's interesting that it was the Gibeonites whom God used to test them, and the Israelites failed. Well, God knew they would fail. Now, verses 7 to 15 deal with the deception. Verses 7 to 15. Now, in these verses, we're going to see what the Gibeonites used to deceive the children of Israel and how Joshua and the leaders reacted. So let's read verse 7. And it says here, and the men of Israel said unto the Hivites, peradventure you dwell, what if you dwell among us? And how shall we make a league with you? The men of Israel suspect that possibly they are Canaanites. And if they are, then they know that God will not allow them to make any kind of an agreement with them. So they know that. Now let's read verse 8. And they said unto Joshua, we are your servants. And Joshua said unto them, who are you, and where do you come from? Now, it says here, they said to Joshua, we are your servants. Now, this was a common saying for the purpose of having Joshua and the men of Israel to give them respect and favor. Now, it does not mean that the Gibeonites were willing and ready to submit to the Jews and to be their servants. It was just a phrase of respect and a favor. That's all. So he says here, Joshua now says to them, who are you and where do you come from? Now, the Gibeonites, obviously, they avoid the first question and they lie about the second question. But instead of asking God about these people, they ask the people about themselves. So Joshua, again, instead of Joshua praying to God and saying, who are they, and give us some, counsel on this. No, they ask the people where they're from. Always remember, God is truthful and can be trusted. Man can never be trusted. In Psalm 58, verse 3, it says, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. What? Speaking lies. Jeremiah 17:9 says what? The heart is deceitful above all things and what? Desperately wicked. Desperately wicked. God can be trusted. Man can't be trusted. Can't trust man. And here Joshua and the children of Israel, instead of asking God about these people, they ask the people about themselves. Well, what do you expect then? Now let's read verses 9 and 10. And it says here, and they said unto him, we're from a far, far country. Thy servants are come because of the name of the Lord thy God. For we have heard the fame of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond Jordan, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and to Og, king of Bashan, which was at Ashtaroth. Now, the Gibeonites, listen to this, the Gibeonites are very careful in how they answer this second question. Because they said that they were from a far away country, then their answer must agree with this. This is why the things that they mention were not the most recent things of crossing the Jordan River or of Jericho or of Ai. They don't mention these things. They only mention the things that would have happened when they supposedly had left from their city from a faraway country. Because in traveling, they might not find these things out. They only mention things that could have reached them in a far away country. Now, verse 9 says, because of the name of the Lord thy God. This is what they say. We came because of the name of the Lord thy God. Now, the Gibeonites, they show respect to Israel's God, which would help soften their hearts toward them. Did they really intend to worship Israel's God? Maybe, and maybe not. But down through the Gibeonites' history, there probably were a number of the Gibeonites that did take take the God of Israel as their God. So, like I said, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years later, they're still Gibeonites, and they're still among the Israelites, and they're still helping to build the temple and to build the wall. So it seems that some of these Gibeonites, maybe not a great number, but some of these Gibeonites would have given their hearts to the God of Israel. But I don't want you to get the impression that these Gibeonites are liars and they're, a pain and all this other stuff. I think there's a whole nother message that's being lost, and it's not known. It's not preached on. It's not taught about. That quite possibly these Gibeonites God is behind them in a sense. He's motivating them and he's protecting. He's compensating them for what happened 280 years ago. And God now is going to preserve them instead of the children of Israel. Instead of killing them, no more killing of these Gibeonites, of these Hivites that live in Gibeon. No more. God's going to preserve them. And you know what the funny thing is? God makes the city of Gibeon a Levitical city. Oh, he's forcing I shouldn't say forcing, but God is putting the Levites in with the Gibeonites, in with the Hivites. Oh yeah, I mean this is I'm telling you, there's more to this. There's way more to this. So we're going to continue on in verse 11 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.